Bowl season is here, and it's time to get in on the action with MyBookie. Are you sick and tired of getting the runaround when you ask for payout? Sign up at mybookie.ag today and get paid fast when you win. MyBookie is your hookup for all your betting needs, and you can even deposit using Bitcoin. They have odds on every matchup, as well as in-game live betting on all this season's NFL and bowl games. My favorite thing about MyBookie is their mobile-optimized site that makes it easy to place bets from the comfort of your smartphone. No matter where you are when you find the matchup you like, it's easy to make bets on the fly with MyBookie. Don't miss out on free money. Join now with the promo code OFFTHECHARTS, and MyBookie will match your deposit with a 50% bonus. That's promo code OFFTHECHARTS, one word, to activate the offer. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid.
Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian, former NFL scout and currently of Sports Info Solutions, joined as always by Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders. Aaron, we saw some crazy bowl games last week, some crazy semifinals. We got to touch on Baker Mayfield and his performance. We've been on record, and I've been on record saying Mayfield's been unbelievable this year. He's a top-notch college quarterback. There's no doubt about it. But I got to say, I was a little bit disappointed with how the semifinal progressed from him. And I think he showed some of the things that make scouts a little bit nervous about him.
Well, also SEC defense, right? My biggest nervous thing about Mayfield has been, wow, those stats are incredible, but it's the Big 12. Well, here he had an SEC defense to go against and had some problems.
So here's what I would say. He's an outstanding player when things are on schedule, when the offense is a step ahead of the defense. You know, when they come out on the first 15, they're always on fire. But this isn't the first time this year where things got a little bit stagnant in the second half. And while it's hard to argue that there's a more accurate passer in the country, he frankly missed on several throws that could have changed the game. I thought in terms of this, my concern was less about competition because for most of the day, he made Georgia look like a Big 12 defense. But what I am concerned about is how he would look without dominant offensive line play in front of him. And I think people don't realize that this has been an offensive line that's been together for years. They have a monster left tackle with huge upside. And I think that's shielded us from seeing a lot of Baker when things are messy and he has people at his feet muddying things up. You know, Don Shula said, show me a good offensive line and I'll show you a good offense. And whoever drafts Baker Mayfield should heed that wisdom.
It is the toughest thing to translate for college quarterbacks to the pros, I think, because one, offensive line play right now is so different in college than the pros. But then even historically, pocket presence is one of the hardest things to measure. You can't really measure it with a drill. You can't really measure it with any kind of a combine, it's not something you measure with log jump or with speed or with three-cone drill or anything. None of that measures pocket presence. Joey Harrington is the best example of a quarterback I can think of who just had such good line play in college that he just never had to face pressure. And then he got to the NFL, and when he faced pressure, he just had no idea what to do with himself.
Excellent piano player, though.
Excellent piano player, but not so good when facing pass pressure. And again, it's hard to translate it.
So I got to say, I hadn't thought this all year, but as I watched Baker during that game, the guy who I was starting to be reminded of as I watched him was Case Keenum. Similar size guys, a similar style of offense guys in college. I think Mayfield's arm is a little bit better than Keenum's, but I think, they're similar in terms of being really good short accuracy guys and maybe leaving a little bit of that to be desired in terms of the big arm strength and the big size stuff that, people getting so excited about, the Rosens and the Darnolds of the world. So I started to think, is he Case Keenum? And then I started to think, if he is Case Keenum, what does that mean? Because we all thought that Case Keenum was just a guy. And now here's Case Keenum. So who is Case Keenum? Who is Baker Mayfield? Really interesting stuff, really interesting game there. The other one that we got to talk about is Lamar Jackson. He threw 4 interceptions after having only 6 the whole year. Was this something that exposed concerns for you about him, or is this an aberration?
Well, I wouldn't want to judge anything based on just one game. It was one really bad game. But, I would want to go on a guy's, entire record. I'm still a Lamar Jackson believer, but you do have to look at this game and figure out what translates to the pros and what creates a problem.
One of the scouts around the office came yesterday and he said, I think Lamar is going to be a riser because once the underwear Olympics start and once people really start digging and getting into, he's reportedly a very good character guy, stuff like that. He's going to run fast. We know that. So maybe he was saying he thinks he could be a first-round pick, which sounded rich to me based on where everybody's at right now. But I could see him being a riser. And again, throwing out a comp out there, I started to think if RG3 had panned out the way it looks like he was going to pan out, would we be talking about Lamar Jackson differently?
Yeah, RG3 was one of the top prospects ever by our Q-based system, and the injury just completely screwed him up. So I hate the idea that when you compare a quarterback to RG3, that's supposed to be a bad thing, because the RG3 as a rookie, RG3 as a rookie was actually really good from the pocket. I mean, he was good in every way.
Better than Andrew Luck, I think,
as a rookie, yeah.
I'm with you. The only way that I think that would be an accurate thing to compare is if you say guys with this playing style are always going to get injured. And
right.
If that's the belief, I could see that. And I think that there is some evidence of that, although we're clearly seeing that the NFL is changing in terms of kind of how that goes with running quarterbacks. But
right. And also, I mean, you can run read option with guys who are not as athletic as Lamar Jackson. Let's be honest. You could run read option with Andy Dalton a few times a game if you feel like it, and you'll get success.
And for me, part of that would be if I'm calling a play where Andy Dalton can get hit by a 300-pound man versus if I draft Lamar Jackson and let him get hit by a 300-pound man, I feel differently about it. That might be my own bias, though.
All right, let's talk some playoffs, my man. Which game do you want to hit on first when it comes to our crazy wild card round with all of these teams that haven't been in the playoffs for years and years and years?
Let's run through them in order. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Titans at Chiefs, the first matchup on Saturday. Got to be honest, it wasn't the matchup that I was most excited about on paper. I think you could say that about both of these AFC matchups in the first round. But there are a few things that popped out as interesting in this one for me. We looked at Kareem Hunt, and his matchup against the Tennessee run defense, I think, could really be where the rubber meets the road in this game. The Titans are 7th in run defense DVOA. They have the 4th lowest yards per attempt against and the 3rd lowest yards after contact against per carry. They're especially great at limiting big runs. As we saw, he's first in open field yards, the Football Outsider stat that measures yards per carry after 10 yards downfield. However, the Titans do have a weakness, and it's tackling efficiency. Their broken tackle rate of 19% is 5th worst in the league. That's 19 broken tackles per 100 runs. And this could be a problem against Kareem Hunt, who leads the league in broken tackles with 69 this season. Next closest is 56. So he's 5th in broken tackle rate, breaking 25.4% of tackles. That could mean trouble for the Titans' run defense.
I will point out that broken tackle rate is for just run plays. Tennessee actually has almost no broken tackles on pass plays. So their total broken tackle rate is 9%, which is actually tied for 5th in the league. The talent on that defense when it comes to tackling is in the secondary. That's why they prevent the open field yards with Byard and Cyprien. But I agree with you that Kareem Hunt matters a lot in this game. When I look at the matchups in this game, this is by far to me the most likely upset of the first weekend, because not only in DVOA is Kansas City's dropped to like 10th or something. So even though Tennessee is only 18th, they're sort of closer together than any other matchup other than Carolina, New Orleans. But also, I think when you look at the matchups here, there's a lot of stuff that kind of favors Tennessee. Like, for example, pass pressure. The Kansas City offense was 16th in pressure rate. The Tennessee defense surprisingly was 7th. There's 35 players that SIS marked with 30 pressures or more, and 3 of them are Tennessee Titans: Derek Morgan, Brian Orakpo, and Jarrell Casey. Flip it the other side. Tennessee's Kansas City defense, despite the presence of Justin Houston, was only 20th in pressure rate, and ESPN Stats and Info actually had them even lower than SIS did. But the Tennessee offensive line is really good at preventing pressure, and they ranked 4th. So it's going to be really hard for Kansas City to pressure Tennessee when Mariota drops back to pass. And, of course, most of the time they're going to want to run the ball. And even though Murray is injured, they've still got Derrick Henry. And Kansas City finished the season dead last in run defense DVOA.
Now, that's a big matchup right there, the run defense DVOA. What I would say is in terms of the passing game, when the Titans have the ball, it's advantage Chiefs. Marcus Mariota has the second worst passer rating against man coverage with at least 100 attempts this year. His passer rating against man is just 55, and we know the Chiefs like to play a lot of man. Mariota's completed 52% of his passes with 2 touchdowns and 8 interceptions against man this year. So, like you're saying, expect them to run some more.
He needs to keep away from Marcus Peters. Keep away from Marcus Peters. It's really easy because the Chiefs are 31st against number 1 receivers because you just keep your number 1 receiver away from Peters. The question is, who do you trust to be the number 1 receiver? Can you trust Corey Davis, who was very poor as a rookie, or are we thinking more Rashard Matthews here? I mean, I think if he can diagnose the man defense, he can get catches, he can get receptions if he stays away from Marcus Peters. The Tennessee pass defense, on the other hand, is really problematic, I think, against Kansas City. They are dead last against running backs in the passing game. So it is like Kareem Hunt go insane as a receiver, 24th against tight ends, against Travis Kelce, that is a not good thing, and 28th against number 2 receivers, and Albert Wilson has been a big part of the sort of rebound of the Kansas City offense in the last few weeks. So that's the place where I think Kansas City has it all over Tennessee, is the Kansas City passing game against the Tennessee secondary and their linebackers, who are really poor in pass coverage.
Right. Before we move on to the next game, I just want to unpack one more thing that we've been talking about since week 1, and that is Alex Smith and the question of whether or not this has been an Alex Smith-like season this year, or if suddenly he's developed this arm strength that nobody saw coming. And I think everybody was surprised to see, as we've seen 16 games, he had a lot of his production coming down the field, but it's not actually that he's throwing down the field very often. It's his ridiculous efficiency on the times when he does take the shots. So on 30 attempts, throwing the ball 30 yards or more downfield, under 2 per game, Smith has 845 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Tyreek Hill is obviously a huge part of that, but we got to remember how usage and efficiency will interact when we see numbers like this. He's picked his spots incredibly well to take deep shots. Big credit to Kareem Hunt, by the way, for creating those opportunities. And it's been amazing. 9 touchdowns on 30 attempts is just ridiculous, unsustainably ridiculous. But I think we should be careful when we go into this narrative of, Alex Smith developed this deep passing ability this year. I think Alex Smith and Andy Reid picked their spots incredibly well where they would go down the field. And Tyreek Hill is one of the fastest players in the NFL.
Oh, well, of course. And special teams, by the way, is also a Kansas City advantage here. And what's interesting about Kansas City special teams, they were 4th in DVOA despite getting no value from returns. If they decide that it's playoff time and it's okay now to risk putting Tyreek Hill back on returns, their special teams become even more valuable.
And Dave Tobb will still not be a head coach.
He's a candidate. People are talking about him as a candidate. Indianapolis, watch for Indianapolis. He may be the next head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. That
would be an interesting one. It could be a really interesting fit there. I agree with you.
I will say, speaking of special teams, another team with fabulous special teams this year, although a questionable kicker right now, is the Rams. So Falcons at Rams. That is our Saturday night prime time. Let's get the big TV ratings in Los Angeles game.
So in this game, the matchup that I'm latching onto is Goff against the Falcons pass defense. And big shout out to Keegan Abdu for some excellent research here. The Falcons play the second most single high coverage in the league. So that's either cover 1 or cover 3, where you have one of the deep safeties over the top in the middle of the field. They play 67% of the time they play a single high coverage, and they play the second least 2 high coverage. So 2 high safeties, either cover 2 or man 2. Goff should expect to see a lot of single high safety, especially because his stats this year are way off against single high. He's only got 7.1 yards per attempt, which is a yard below his season average, and he's got an 84 quarterback rating, down from over 100 overall. This could be a really tough matchup for him, and I'm curious to see what cover 1 and cover 3 beaters McVay will have in store as he goes against that Falcons pass D.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Falcons defense is that they did the same thing this year that they did last year. I feel like the Falcons defense, the production and the numbers never match the amount of talent that we feel is on that defense, the young, fast talent. But once again this year, they improved in the second half of the season. Atlanta's defense, 29th in DVOA in the first half of the season, improved to 11th in the second half of the season. Wow. They improved against both the pass and the run. right? So whether it's Goff or Gurley, the defense improved in the second half. And I don't have any explanation for why for 2 straight years that defense would improve in the second half of the season. But I will say that the Falcons' pass defense is stronger against slot receivers, but weaker against outside receivers. So I would expect to see more Watkins and Woods and less of Cooper Kupp in this game than we've seen in most recent weeks for the Rams.
I think one fascinating matchup, too, will be Todd Gurley in the screen game. I think we can expect Goff to throw some running back passes to beat that cover 3 that the Falcons will be sitting in a lot of the time. And a big reason for Todd Gurley's resurgence this year has been the efficient use of the screen game by the Rams. They've only run the 12th most screens in the league, but they have the second most yards off screens for a league-leading 10.3 yards per attempt. That's almost 3 standard deviations above the league average of just 6 yards per attempt on screens. So it's incredible to maintain that kind of efficiency over the course of the season. And it's been all about Todd Gurley. He receives about half of the Rams' screens, and he averages an absurd 13.3 yards per target on screens. His 371 receiving yards off screens are 121 more than second place, Kamara, and he does a lot of his damage after contact, 9 yards per reception after contact. The Falcons' defense, meanwhile, they allow the second highest completion percentage on screens, but they do a good job of limiting the effectiveness, allowing a relatively average 6.4 yards per attempt on screen passes. So they'll play a lot of cover 3. They'll let the catch happen in front of them, but they have good team speed and they do a good job of rallying to the ball.
Yep. We always hear about Deion Jones and his speed. Let's see it in this game. One more interesting Falcons stat I'll point out, which is the Falcons have a Patriots-like defense this year when it comes to the red zone and the bend but don't break. I don't know how real that is for teams other than the Patriots. There doesn't seem to be a lot of consistency in actually being better in the red zone. But I will point out that they were 22nd in defensive DVOA, but 6th in the red zone this year. Their offense is the other way around. The offense was 9th, but 22nd in the red zone. And we all know that for some reason, they just have trouble going to Julio Jones in the red zone.
Yeah, that's one of the really bizarre ones that really doesn't make any sense to me. My last note on this game is just let's take a moment to appreciate Aaron Donald.
He's awesome. He's the awesome.
Let's throw some Aaron Donald stats out there. Aaron Donald versus other defensive tackles in the league that have had at least 100 plays where they were rushing the passer. Aaron Donald has 11.5 total sacks. The next closest is 8.5. He's got 4 forced fumbles. That's first in the league. He's got 50 hurries. Next closest is 37 amongst these defensive tackles. 34 quarterback hits. Next closest is 26th. And his 13.4% pressure rate is first by over 3%. The next closest is at 10.3%. Aaron Donald's just unbelievable. He's got to get off that's legendary in NFL history.
Yes, Donald is amazing, and at least that gives us a transition here because the one I think maybe another great, amazing defensive lineman who I actually voted in the ESPN Insider MVP poll this year. At different times of the year, I had 2 defensive linemen in my top 5. One was Aaron Donald, and the other was Calais Campbell. So that brings us to the first Sunday game, which is the, oh my God, they are in the playoffs, Buffalo Bills at the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I'm so sad to say this for Bills fans, and I know I angered them by saying this on ESPN, but in my mind, this is the least likely upset of the day. It's a wonderful story that the Bills made the playoffs. They totally don't belong in this game, and even with Jacksonville being the most inconsistent team in the league, they are going to win this game. The only question is, do they win it tight because they have a bad day, or do they completely wall up the Bills because they have one of their good days?
So I'm gonna give you some reasons why I think the Bills could have a shot. Reason number 1, Blake Bortles quarterbacks the Jaguars.
Okay.
Reason number 2. Reason number 2. I think that the Bills are actually built offensively like the exact opposite type of team that the Jaguars want to face. So the Jaguars, like we've discussed many times this year, they're built to shut down your passing game. They lead the league with a quarterback rating of 62 against. But the Bills with Tyrod Taylor, LaShawn McCoy, they want to win by controlling the clock and limiting turnovers. Could that be something that actually plays into the Jaguars' relatively weak run defense?
There's one problem with that, and it is LaShawn McCoy's ankle.
Yes, it is.
If it was not for LaShawn McCoy's ankle, I would agree with you. But a lot of the discussion is that even if McCoy is able to play, he will not be at 100%. The difference in having an injured starting running back between having Derrick Henry, like Tennessee does, and having Marcus Murphy and Mike Tolbert, like Buffalo does, is huge. Jacksonville, not only poor run defense, they are also susceptible to running backs in the receiving game. But are you really that scared about Marcus Murphy and Mike Tolbert going up against Paul Posluszny? Or are you scared of a 100% healthy LaShawn McCoy? Because you're not getting 100% healthy LaShawn McCoy. Also, I will say on defense, the Bills, 31st in pressure rate and 30th in broken tackle rate.
Right. I agree with you on that side. On that side of the ball, I think it's kind of the same story in that the Jaguars want to run the ball, and the Bills are kind of are built to shut down the pass a little bit more than the run. They've allowed a quarterback rating 72 on their year, fourth in the league. You're saying dead last in terms of pass DVOA?
Run defense since midseason, since trading Marcel Darius to Jacksonville, Buffalo, the worst run defense in the league.
All right. That's a big problem because, like you were saying, this game looks like it's going to be Fournette against whoever makes up the Bills running game. And the Bills should really hope that that's McCoy. I know you said nobody's scared of Mike Tolbert. I think Buffalo Bills fans would disagree with you.
They're scared of Mike Tolbert.
Right. Okay. Well, a little bit of a less exciting game there than the finale of the weekend. And Panthers Saints for the third time this year is one that everybody's looking forward to. What are you looking forward to in this matchup?
Oh, this is the one that I actually went to in New Orleans. And this is the one where watching that game, I went, oh my God, the Panthers offense is so badly designed. Then there were other games where I was like, the Panthers offense is so well designed. And then last week against Atlanta, I went back to, oh my God, the Panthers offense is so badly designed. So I think the biggest thing in this game is which offensive line can do the best to prevent the other team's pressure, because Carolina pressure rate is 5th on defense, but the New Orleans offense is 3rd. And the New Orleans defense is 9th, but the Carolina offense is 10th. So it's a really good matchup of strong offensive line play versus strong pass pressure.
So I think when you see a pass pressure matchup like that, you got to think about the home field advantage and how that'll play a role. Obviously, you were down there, like you said, for that first game.
It was loud.
It's very difficult to beat a team 3 times in 1 year, as we've seen before. But
they say that, but it's not really true.
Interesting.
The majority of the time, I think it's something like 14 out of the last 20 times. Don't quote me on this stat. The team that won the first 2 won the third. It's hard to beat a team 3 times, but it's even harder to take a team that's beaten you twice and beat them a third time. That being said, the first Carolina-New Orleans game was nowhere near as close as the second Carolina-New Orleans game was.
Right. So one matchup that I look at, we got to go back to these rookie running backs, McCaffrey versus Kamara. McCaffrey obviously went higher in the draft, but Kamara has been the more dynamic player of the two this year. The two rookies finished with almost identical numbers in terms of carries and receptions. So Kamara, 120 carries to McCaffrey's 117. Kamara, 82 receptions to McCaffrey's 80, almost identical. But in terms of yardage, it wasn't close. Kamara had almost 300 more rushing yards, and he also outpaced him by 146 receiving yards. So McCaffrey, he's a larger part of his team's passing game by percentage. He accounts for 27% of his team's receptions compared to 21% for Kamara. But after one regular season in the books, Kamara has been the more explosive player, and he's been the one that's generated more yardage for that powerful Saints offense.
Yeah, McCaffrey, it just seems like they don't have any idea how to build runs for him. He's been very valuable as a receiver, but not as a runner. And it just seems like they don't know how to fit his running style.
Right. So speaking of stylistic things, Cam Newton, and no stats to throw at you here, but we talked last week a little bit of the Patrick Ewing theory of Kelvin Benjamin and how their offense seems to have improved since he left. And I don't want to sleep on the Panthers too much because the offense has become very efficient over the later part of the year. I'm starting to think if maybe we should question the kind of common knowledge, the prevailing thought that when a quarterback's weakness is accuracy, that you want to surround him with big receivers so that they can make up for that lack of accuracy with catch radius and, you have a bigger margin for error with that big receiver. I think that's how they've tried to build around Cam Newton, the Funchess and the Benjamin together. But I think what you actually need when you're a less accurate quarterback is a guy that can generate more separation with speed and quickness so that you're not having to throw big players open. You're just throwing to open players. So the whole line of thought of, oh, our guy's not so accurate, let's get some big receivers so he can't overthrow them, I think it might be outdated. And I think that Cam is shown by being so much better than he was with McCaffrey, than he was with Patrick Ewing, Kelvin Benjamin. It's starting to have me think that big receivers for inaccurate quarterbacks is a fallacy. And then compare it to the other side of the ball with Drew Brees, who had a lot of success when I was around him with guys like Marcus Colston and Jimmy Graham. And maybe the thought should actually be the opposite, that big receivers need accurate QBs to highlight their skill set.
Right, because if you want to put the ball where the defender can't get it, but your tall receiver can, that does require touch and accuracy.
Precisely. And
I will also.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll say, no, finish with your thought first.
And I just was saying, yes, that I think that it's bizarre that there's this prevailing line of common wisdom that's gone around league circles for a while, to the point where the team building strategy of the Panthers was really to get these big receivers around Cam. It's fascinating that it seems like it's going in a different direction now. And I'm curious to see how that develops into the future.
I will also point out that what has improved for the Carolina offense over the second half of the year is the run more than the pass. In passing, they've gone from 23rd to 15th. In run, they've gone from 24th to 5th. So there's been a big increase in the efficiency of both Newton on runs and Jonathan Stewart. And then even McCaffrey has gone from awful on runs to meh. I still don't think they can design good runs for him, but at least he's getting more efficiency out of it. So it's not even that when we talk about Carolina's offense getting better in recent weeks, it's not the pass offense per se. It's the run offense more than the pass offense.
And probably something to do with that is taking the top off the defense with those fast guys on the field now, as opposed to these two big, slow guys on the outside, and you can bring your safeties down.
The biggest thing Carolina needs to do in the offseason is get themselves a real number one receiver. It would matter so much to that offense. A fast number one receiver would matter so much. And I will also say New Orleans, their defense has also gotten better against the run in the second half of the season, which sort of matches the Carolina offense getting better running the ball. So this is a good, close matchup. I think the Saints are better. And I think that the Saints are at home. And it's going to be hard for Carolina to win, but I don't see it being a blowout the way I think Buffalo-Jacksonville has a strong chance of being a blowout. And I even think there's a good chance of the Falcons Rams game being a blowout. I think this is going to be close no matter what. I just think there's a good chance of the Saints winning it.
It's the NFL and it's 2018. Nothing that I see this weekend will surprise me. LaShawn McCoy coming out and running for a ton on that ankle will surprise me, but anything else now, who knows? Fair enough. All right, Aaron, let's sign off. And a quick reminder to all of our listeners, please support the show, rate us, share us with your friends. We'll be having lots of the Football Outsiders guys on as we progress through the playoffs to help us preview the games. As a reminder, our MyBookie promo code is off the charts, one word. You type in the promo code and you get free money to use to gamble on the playoff games. So you can enjoy that. And of course, follow us on Twitter at sportsinfo_SIS, at FB Outsiders. We'll be tweeting all weekend long. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.